In 2014, Adam Stewart was sent out to conduct some field work alone and unarmed in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. The route he embarks upon is teeming with bears, something that Adam expressed concerns about to his boss, but his concerns were swept under the carpet. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying bear attack on Adam Stewart. Welcome to Final Affliction. 31-year-old Adam Stewart was an avid outdoorsman and loved the adventure of the wilderness. He worked as an outfitter at nearby Zion National Park and also as a river guide, but he did other work too. In the summer of 2014, he had been contracted by Nature's Capital, a U.S. Forest Service contractor, to carry out vegetation surveys in the Bridger-Teton National Forest. It is the third largest forest in the U.S. outside Alaska, encompassing 3.4 million acres. It stretches from Yellowstone National Park to Grand Teton National Park, taking in the Continental Divide and the mountains near the Idaho border. Adam would be conducting the field work alone, something he had expressed concerns about to his boss. He was experienced in the great outdoors and was well aware that he was entering bear country, but his concerns largely went unanswered. On the morning of September 4, 2014, he headed to the Brooks Lake trailhead where he parked his car before walking into the forest. He carried with him his survey equipment as well as camping gear. He planned on spending the night in the field before returning to base the next day, but that would never happen. It was a sunny day. Not a cloud could be seen in the sky, but there was a chilly breeze in the air. In a few days' time, a snowstorm would sweep through the area, covering everything in a light blanket of white. But for now, it was the perfect hiking weather. It was almost 10 a.m. when Adam set off. He was renowned for his rapid hiking speed and walked briskly along the trail. He was athletic and fit, and covering many miles in one day was just part of the job. He needed to set up camp before heading to his survey site. He wore light trail running shoes, outdoors clothing, a baseball cap, and sunglasses. He was used to this work and had been assessing vegetation plots all summer. His supervisor, Stephen Rust, pinged Adam's InReach GPS to get a location on him. He could see that Adam's day's work had already begun and that he was making his way from the car park towards his campsite that morning. After 5 miles, Adam had made it to the camping spot. It was the last area of flat ground before Adam would start climbing uphill to the vegetation plot. He erected his tent, hoisted his food high up in a tree, and set off to conduct his work. The designated area for his survey was 3 miles from his campsite, and it was already mid-afternoon. It was off the beaten track, and Adam needed to traipse through thick undergrowth to get there. The trees were dense, obscuring his view. He naturally found a game trail where the vegetation was trodden down, making the progress easier. It wound through the trees and up and over fallen trunks, but this game trail was frequented by bears. Both black bears and grizzlies were numerous in the area. Adam was quiet during his hike, a dangerous thing to be when in bear country. After 1.8 miles of hiking, the trail began to head uphill. The plot site was a further mile up the hill, but Adam never made it. Unbeknown to Adam, a bear was just yards away, and even more alarmingly, Adam is walking right into its lair. The bear's food cache, consisting of 2 devoured mule deer carcasses, was hidden by leaves, twigs, and dirt. To Adam, the mounds of vegetation went unnoticed, as did a small amount of deer fur sticking out between the leaves. His line of sight was obscured by the trees, and he failed to notice a bear tucking into one of the mule deer remains. As Adam rounded the next tree, he suddenly came face to face with it. The two stood just feet apart, and he knew he had startled it. There was just one single moment, one split second, when the two of them just stared at each other, their eyes locking. But Adam was alone and unintimidating for the bear. His heart pounced in his chest. Adrenaline flooded his veins. He was in serious trouble. Instantly, the bear bounded forwards and leapt on top of Adam. His hat and glasses went flying. He was floored, landing heavily on the ground, but cushioned by his backpack. As the two grappled with one another, Adam knew that he was in the fight of his life, He didn't carry with him a firearm or bear spray. His only form of defense was his fists. The bear's immense power was pushing Adam down into the ground. He struggled to move, and he struggled to breathe as the weight of the bear bore down on him. The sharp claws sliced through his skin as it swiped at him over and over. Adam tried to keep the bear's snout away from him. He could smell the stench of its breath and hear its guttural growling as it mauled him. But it was too strong for Adam, and moments later the bear brought its jaws crunching down around Adam's skull. The attack was rapid and devastating, with one bite from its jaws exerting a bite force of more than 1,000 psi. Adam sustained unsurvivable injuries. His skull cracked, and he was gone. He was due back the next day, but it wasn't until 2 days later, September 7th, that his supervisor, Stephen Rust, notified the Fremont County Sheriff's Department that Adam was missing. An officer headed to the trailhead and located Adam's car, leaving 2 notes on it for Adam to report to the sheriff's office. But by the following day, on September 8th, there was still no sign of Adam. People were growing increasingly concerned for his welfare, and a search and rescue operation was initiated. It took a further 4 days before Adam's body was located. The search team came across his hat and glasses lying along the game trail. Then his blue backpack was sticking out from some undergrowth and a light covering of snow on the ground. Below it were his remains, largely scattered around the bear's cache. Officers from the Sheriff's Department and Wyoming Game and Fishing were notified of the discovery of Adam's remains and flew to the location, arriving at 5:30 that evening. There was very little left of Adam, and some of his remains were even buried alongside one of the 2 deer carcasses in another cache. Officers were forced to leave the area at 7:30 p.m. before the sun went down, but returned with a team of 10 people the next day. There, they conducted a full grid search, starting at the cache site and moving outwards to try and work out exactly what had happened. Inside Adam's backpack were his sampling gear for the vegetation plots and his camera. His equipment hadn't yet been used, nor any notes made in his notebook, suggesting he was on his way to the site when he was attacked. The last photo taken on Adam's camera was time-stamped 2:33 p.m., showing a picture of the cliffs along the Continental Divide. It is believed that Adam was killed shortly after he snapped that photo. From the investigative work at the kill site, it appeared that Adam had stumbled upon a bear by mistake. He had been attacked along the game trail where he died from his injuries. As the trail wound uphill, it wouldn't have been possible for Adam to see the bear until he had made it to the top of the rise, but by then it was too late. He would have likely come face to face with it less than 20 feet away. Even if he had bear spray or a weapon, there likely wouldn't have been enough time to use it. His body was then dragged over a fallen tree trunk and mostly devoured and scavenged by multiple animals over the next 8 days. There seemed to be multiple bears, as there was no evidence of mountain lions or wolves. There was evidence of both black bears and grizzlies in the area. A day bed was located just feet from one of the food caches. Bear scat and fur were dotted around the site, and footprints were numerous. Fur samples found at the site indicated that there were at least 4 different bears, 3 grizzlies and 1 black bear. A trap was set up, but only 1 male grizzly was caught. He wasn't known to officials, and his DNA wasn't in the database for nuisance bears. Because so much time had passed since Adam had been killed, it was impossible to determine which of the bears in the vicinity, if any, were responsible. There was no sign of bear activity at Adam's campsite, and his tent was still intact. Officials could see that he had stored his food away properly. His remains were helicoptered out of the area. There was so little left of him, and his bones were so scattered around the cache that mule deer bones were accidentally collected as well. Despite the state of his body, the coroner was still able to determine that he died from blunt force trauma from a bite to his head. Following Adam's tragic death, Nature's Capital, the company he was working for, were fined $39,000, which was quickly reduced to just $13,120. The tiny sum of money seemed like an insult to all who knew and loved Adam, and his father described it as a joke, especially considering the concerns Adam had raised with his boss before leaving for the field. It was a terrible loss for Adam's family. To lose someone so young and full of life is a huge tragedy, and no amount of money would ever bring Adam back. But it was an accident that was avoidable if a few precautions had been considered beforehand. Sadly, none of them were, leading Adam Stewart to meet his terrifying final affliction.